You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
Touchdown! A.J. Brown! That's beautiful. And intercepted by the Eagles. He is hit. They got him again! They got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles!
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Eric Reese, Zach Chavalella. And how are you gentlemen feeling today?
You know, I saw this on the I think I'm bringing this up each week now when I'm on the Instagram reels from trying to fall asleep. There was a skit with like Kenan Thompson where somebody was asking like, hey dad, like how you doing? And like it didn't go into like how he was doing at all. He's like, yeah, the Eagles are doing pretty well. Like it was just right in sports. I'm trying to avoid giving that answer, but I'm doing great because I have another concert to look forward to at the end of the week. I'm seeing the Dillinger Escape Plan come back around with their original singers, so that's gonna be sick. Besides that, just kind of down to brass tacks, going back to the sports stuff. So not a lot to look forward to. Going all right though.
As long as you're doing well, that's the only thing that matters. How you feeling down there, Zach? Before you give us our
down there, damn, we're already off on it. Damn, all right, look at that. Well, down here, everything should be fine. You know, I don't know. I should be happy. Eagles won against Washington in commanding fashion, might I say. I got to take in a free Mount Joy concert with Jason Kelsey before the game. I got to talk to Matt from Mount Joy before the show. All of that bodes well, and yet my Philadelphia 76ers keep me from being happy. So we'll touch more on that later. But the Eagles are flying high, and they got that going for them.
I like how we end the show with a segment that Eric loves when it comes to predictions. I feel like now we have to incorporate a segment of Sixers, like a little jingle to it. Now,
we might honestly even just play one of the sounds from the stadium. That would work too. While we're digging deep into my life, I will say also, I decided to sell off in fantasy football at the trade deadline, and I still eked out a win this week. So I'm actually feeling pretty good about that. So Liam Jenkins is not feeling great, but I'm feeling pretty good.
I'm not in dead last.
We are not going to discuss fantasy football league.
Wait, Zach. Tim's not here. Do we have to start?
I did invite a special guest who.
Oh, fine. Let's bring him in. Let's have a show. You want to open this sucker up? Let's go.
You're a never-ending show.
Each time Zach brings up the Sixers, I'll just push for you guys to watch the Flyers because, hey, they suck, but I guess they're winning more, aren't they?
I'd rather watch the Flyers, man. They're so much more entertaining right now.
That's what I said, but no one else would like to talk about it outside.
I like hockey, but it's got to be in person. I can't watch it on TV for some reason.
I can watch it on TV. I love it in person. Hockey's the greatest game to go to in person.
In person is freaking phenomenal. Like
I love watching it on TV too. I don't mind. People talk about how it's just constant movement. People love to complain always, right? Yeah. Either the NBA is too slow, hockey they're moving too much. Like for some reason, football, which I love football. This is a football podcast, so I'm not going to blaspheme football. Is that kind of perfect combination for people? But like,
unless you're a Cowboys fan.
Adjust your attention span, man. Like if you want to watch something that's football paced, that's fine. If you learn to watch something a little faster, watch some hockey. A little slower, watch some basketball. At a dead fucking stop, watch some baseball. Like just adjust your speed of what you pay attention to. Like it's not that, but people.
Yeah, I think that if everybody had like that same common bitch about like each sport, it would be something like along the lines of like for me, like speaking for myself, basketball doesn't have the defense that I grew up with. Like in the 90s when that's when I was more of a basketball fan. Now I'll go 82 games without watching it. And if the Sixers make the playoffs, then I guess I'm a casual Sixers fan.
Right there with Eric.
But with the with football, people say it's too slow. I can never it's part of my DNA. Where even if I don't cover the sport, I covered arena football because I wanted to cover football. That takes some desire to want to drive to arena football games for leagues that don't exist anymore. And then and I think as far as baseball is concerned, the whole pitch clock thing, like I guess at the end of the day, like I hate that they're speeding up for people who would otherwise not watch it anyway. Because when I go to a game, I don't have the time to take in a ballpark like I used to.
I don't like the whole pitch clock. Whoa. I don't like the whole pitch clock.
We're starting early today.
You should not talk about time ever again. Never talk about time, Brian.
Oh, God, I hate the pitch clock. Just because I feel like it takes away that intensity when the pitcher's staring down the batter and it's like got the fans like standing up and like waiting for the next move. It's just I don't know. I kind of miss that a little bit.
I'll say the one I brought up about this year specifically in football was the onside kick. I don't understand why you have to let the other team know that the onside kick's coming. The onside kick is a surprise element. It's a surprise element play to get the ball back so you can potentially steal a win. If you're doing this gentlemanly, like, hey, we're trying to get the ball back, we're trying to steal one on you. What are we doing here? This is so dumb.
Yeah, does anyone remember an injury happening on an onside kick? Because I feel like that's the only excuse, but I don't remember that ever happening.
I don't think so. I think what happened was the kickers were starting to get a little creative with like the back behind the back kind of kick.
Good, make it a skill fucking position.
Yes, awesome, yes. But like I don't know, the NFL it's a dictatorship at the end of the day over there. It's I love covering football, but just some things that just like get over it kind of thing. Like just stop making all these weird rules. Like why can't teams celebrate? Why can't an AJ Brown get into a face of a defender when he scores a touchdown or a big grab? Like
I want 3 pumps, bare minimum. Bare minimum 3 pumps.
I remember, like, wasn't it Dante Hall who would do the worm? Like, back on the Chiefs, like, I don't know, probably like 2005, probably. I don't know if anybody else remembers this. But he used to do the worm, I'm pretty sure, when he returned, like, a punt return. And, I mean, I missed that. You're not getting anybody to do the worm anymore. One of my favorite celebrations was Joe Horn, who hit the cell phone in the pad of the goalpost.
Oh, yeah.
And he pulled it out.
With a pen in the sock.
Well, yeah, the TO, yeah.
That creative backflips, I love it all. Just I want more of it. You want people to be excited about football? Let the players celebrate. Like I don't understand
celebrations. Let them score.
But you know what we can enjoy is the fact that although the team started off rough, after the bye week, the Eagles are on a 6-game winning streak. They are 8-2. They officially have the number 1 defense in the league, which I feel like none of us predicted that to be a thing. I think we all had an idea where it's like they had the potential to be freaking good because Fangio was here and then like the young pieces, but I don't think any of us saw this kind of like legit defense coming to fruition. Offensively, I think Eric, can be honest, it was like they think they're 5th ranked offense in the league currently.
Yeah, for offense, their total offense is 5th ranked according to ESPN.
So the Eagles are cooking at the right time, but they could it be a situation of too little, too late in a weird way where they're playing catch up with the Detroit Lions? We'll kind of break down the schedules, how they compare. But for right now, I mean, how impressed, and I feel like we kind of went over this a little bit on Saturday, but taking everything in after all the games, how impressed are you that this team is actually finding its footing after in last year's collapse? I mean, Nick Sirianni has kind of just backed out of the spotlight. He's kind of calmed down a bit, and we're seeing this defense come to life, and this offense, although they're not fully there yet, they're moving in the right direction.
The team feels so much more focused, and one of the reasons why I say that, and I'll cite Sirianni real quick. He said it's so important that we have the mindset that we aren't focused on anything else, not the past, not the future, just literally where we are. We try to talk about that every single day. And what he meant by that was, from the years that he's been the Eagles head coach from 2021 till now, he's had failures, he's had successes. The team was 9-8 in 2021. They started 4-6. The last 2 years, they started 9-1 to varying results. Now they're 8-2, and it seems like, we kind of had that feeling like last year, and in a sense where it's like, okay, the destiny's in our hands. I think my answer is always going to be, I want to see how our destiny plays out against stronger opponents, because right now I think we're in the middle of a sort of cupcake schedule. And I mean, I will say that about the Commanders too, because I think exactly what we talked about last week was we exposed the Commanders. We kept everything pretty much in front of them except for like 2 Austin Eckler short passes. So they were short passes and he broke a tackle. I think, and that has everything to say about having the right coordinators and developing the players correctly. But what I do like about this team compared, with a similar start this year and compared to the last two seasons, is it feels more like 2022 versus 2023 in a sense that I look at this team as more focused on the moment and not looking ahead and not looking behind.
Yeah, I have to echo, I think, a good portion of that. Just more so, this is where the test really begins with the team. I think it's great that they're on a 6-game win streak. I think it's great that the team is clicking on at least 4 more cylinders than they were previous. I think that there is still room for improvement, obviously, when you look at how Jalen Hurts has performed. Sirianni still has room to improve. Whoever is actually calling plays still has room to improve. I think all of that is still pretty clear and evident. So when you talk about matchup against the Rams, who are a team that had a very difficult start to the year, but are really starting to pull things together now that Cooper Kupp's healthy, now that Puka Nacua is healthy. Their defense is also extremely young, and they now have a fair amount of experience, under their belt. So that helps as well if you're LA. This is the first game where you really begin to see what the Philadelphia Eagles are made of. And it's not going to be decided just by the results of this game, but this is kind of that entree before, or that appetizer, I should say, before you go into Baltimore for that entree, before you welcome in the Steelers to town, before you have the revenge game against the Commanders in Washington. And I mean, the rest of the other games in the season seem pretty simple and straight ahead. But when you are trying to catch up, or even not catch up, but establish your dominance over a team like the Detroit Lions, you have to win in these games. You have to make sure that you have these marquee wins, because you can't be that Fugazi team. We saw this with the Pittsburgh Steelers years ago. Obviously, the Eagles just last year. You can't be that Fugazi team that walks in and is like, oh, why I didn't beat anyone. The Lions have already beaten the Vikings. Lions have beaten the Texans. The Cardinals, you can say what you will about them. They do lead the NFC West. They beat the Cardinals as well. They've also already beat this Rams team. Like, there's a list of quality wins that Detroit has over other teams that are in that upper echelon. Not great, all of them necessarily across the board, but more competitive than some of what Philadelphia's had to play this year. So against this competition, like I said, this is really the first test, and we'll see how they do from here.
And a little bit of comparison to kind of what Zach was saying, even against the easier teams that the Eagles have played, the Lions have their share of easier opponents too, but the margin of victory is so huge where you're kind of led to believe that the Lions do look like the more complete team. And I think that has everything to do with just kind of getting it out of the gate. If let's just say it comes down to the Lions in Philadelphia, which team do you think is going to get out of the gate early in the first quarter? All the history this season says probably the Lions, and that could be the difference. So that's really where you got to start, finding that room to focus.
And it's definitely going to be a huge test. Like you mentioned, the Eagles have four competitive games left in the schedule. They have the Ravens, they have the Rams, they have the Commanders, and they have the Steelers, which I completely overlooked. The Lions, they really don't have anybody else that they're facing outside of the Packers, the Bills. I mean, the 49ers, if they show up, right? Like, they could play spoiler. They have them in week 17. If both teams are neck and neck and it's literally just one loss that's going to cut it, Niners could, do us justice by actually showing up. But I think this is more on the Eagles than it is on the Lions, right? Like you mentioned, the Lions they beat the life out of the Jaguars, and the Eagles almost lost to the Jaguars by letting them back into the game. Their offense is in a rhythm while the Eagles are still trying to figure out who their offense is outside of Saquon Barkley. And we were discussing that before the podcast. Like, without the rushing attack, like, this offense is not going to really do much. And we've seen them look stale at times where the passing game is just not there. And it's it's such a weird thing, and I know we've been pointing. I've been pointing fingers all for the last 2 years on why this wide receiver tag looks so stale, but there's got to be some type of middle ground, right? Like we see, like, I don't know. Just the way I think is like, if my offense is pushing with the rushing attack, right? I can experiment with the passing attack. I can experiment with a slant here, a slant there, maybe a screen pass, maybe something close to the offensive line where you allow like a AJ Brown and a Devontae Smith and a Dallas Goedert to actually get some yards after the catch. And it just seems like this is all about, getting them downfield, getting the ball in their hands, and just moving the chains every single time. And the Lions don't do that. The Lions they do play action. They lean on their run game. Like they feed off their rushing attack more than the Eagles do. With the Eagles, it's more like Saquon or bust, and it's a scary idea, right? Because if Philadelphia can get it together and look at it as like Saquon and then play action and then intermediate stuff, curl routes, whatever the case may be, like getting the ball into the guys' hands, like Devontae Smith, AJ, and Dallas early in the game, and the quick reads as well, where you find Jalen Hurts has his confidence again. I feel like that's the only way we're going to be able to say that this team surpasses the Lions. But I'm 100% on what Eric is saying. It's just like everything leans towards the Lions being that team that we want the Eagles to be at this very moment.
And I don't think it's to say that that the Philadelphia can't kind of make it a interesting, even a close, maybe defeat the Lions if they were to go head to head. I look at just in a sense of kind of what we were all sniffing around as far as the offense is. The Eagles over the course of the season are obviously very run influenced, and they're not going to try to lead with the pass. I don't think anybody is, granted, and this is kind of wild to say, but you got Smitty out there, you got AJ Brown, but I don't think anybody is too terrified of the Eagles passing game, and that's different to kind of think about.
Is that more like on Jalen Hurts thing, or is that truly the play calling?
I think it's more so probably the play calling, because I think and it's not necessarily that the you're not putting the passing attack in a position to succeed, but you're kind of saying, all right, we're going to be run heavy, and we're going to excel at the run, and if they're excelling at the run, they're not shying away from running the ball. That's something we've seen in previous years. Now they're pounding it with Saquon, and Saquon's getting an egregious amount of yards a game. He's getting his change of pace back with Gainwell out there too, but you're not really. Just these past few games, you haven't seen. I don't think at more than 20 attempts. I think that's probably been around the average.
No, he's been up there. I think last game was 26 attempts.
No. From Hurts throwing.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So as far as Hurts throwing the ball, I don't think you've seen more than really 20 attempts over the past few games. So the Eagles are pretty much saying, hey, it's not a matter of I don't think it's a matter of the passing attack being ineffective. I just think that it's not the primary weapon anymore. And I think we were used to seeing that being a primary weapon. Now when you have an elite back, you're kind of just, it shows. And it shows in the way that the philosophy is kind of, resetting itself on offense.
Hurts hasn't had more than 18 completions and actually the last, 7 games. And only one of those games he actually passed for 30 attempts. And he didn't pass, he actually just hit 30 attempts.
Okay.
Yeah, but damn, wow. I didn't
They've taken a lot of the pressure off of Hurts as far as throwing the ball. And I don't know if that's necessarily like we need to take away Hurts having a responsibility or something, because as far as a way of kind of trying to protect the football. Because I think he's been fine. He threw one pick, right? And granted, the real verdict on him lately is still that he's holding the ball for too long. Okay, that is an absolutely fair assessment. But I do look at Hurts and the way he's played. I'm like, man, in the attempts that he gets throughout the game, I'll take that performance each time.
I think it's just a reach too, because like Jalen and Lamar are actually neck and neck for holding the ball the longest in the league, which ironically, hey, they're the two both running quarterbacks, and they have a reason to do so, right? But it's just wild, like against New Orleans, Jalen Hurts 76 completion percentage, 76%, sorry, and over 300 passing yards. Like, we know this team can air it out, right? And yes, we've been begging them to lean on Saquon, and they should. But I think we're at the point where it's kind of like, okay, Rams are here, Baltimore's here, Pittsburgh's coming up, Washington again. It's time to mix it up and actually be a little bit more unpredictable.
I mean, listen, I think part of it is the running game, certainly. Part of it, potentially, is keeping things simple for Jalen Hurts. But let's not forget that one of the main philosophies of this team is winning the time of possession battle, right? And they do love their big plays, but they also like to win the time of possession. On the season, they're 4th in the league in time of possession, average time of possession, not including overtime. Over their last 3 games, they're 2nd in the entire NFL, going up from over 32 and a half minutes, which is their average over the year, to 35 minutes average time of possession, right? So that's a pretty solid game over those last 3 games. That's what this team, especially against some of these weaker teams that we've seen, the Dallas game, for instance, obviously, like, that sticks out. But in these types of situations, the Eagles especially want to maintain that possession battle win. Against the Detroit team, can you do that? Yeah, we'll see. But I think what's going to be interesting is if the Eagles are going to be able to play the game they want against the Rams, who have a pretty electric offense, right, with guys like Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kieran Williams. So when you are going up against that, can they afford to try and win that possession battle again? So that's why I think this game is going to be particularly interesting path forward. Specifically, Jalen Hurts and this offense. Do we see more of the same, or do we get to see, just because of sheer necessity, more of what you're looking for? Well, let's see Jalen throw the ball 20 plus times a game. Let's see that passing attack increase because the need might be more necessary.
And that's sort of what Kellen Moore, I think, was saying today, that they adjust their approach on like a game by game basis. Like, yeah, there's going to be games where they know that they need to kind of air it out more. They need to attack through the air. But if you can get the job done and the rushing game is working, it does kind of go with the whole idea of where if it's not broken, then what are we trying to fix here? I do 100% agree that there are going to be times, probably against defenses down the line before the postseason begins, where you need to kind of figure out, can you take advantage of this of the secondary through the pass? Can you instill that confidence within the team? Now, if we're comparing to a team that like in comparison with the Lions, I kind of tend to find that the details lie like in favor of Philadelphia. If you're talking defense, if you're talking defense as a whole, it's very close. The Lions are not a bad defense. The Philadelphia Eagles are the best defense. To me, that's the difference. There is literally as a unit being the best defense, and the strides that they've taken from the beginning of the season till now. I hate to play this what if game, but opposite to last season, where I was saying, man, it's so close. This one team could have had this one play, and the Eagles could have been 9-7, and whatever it was, or however it was at the time when I said that. I think now the record for the Eagles could have actually been better, because when I look back at that Atlanta game, I'm like, man, like if Atlanta played this defense now, there's not a question
in
my mind that Philadelphia comes out with that win.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, at the time, and like a lot of people were probably sitting there going like, I can't believe they lost to Atlanta. Okay, fair. But we did see Atlanta be more than what we thought they were. Now that the Eagles are more than what we think that we thought they were as well, I think it's fair to say that they got a do-over, they got a mulligan in that game. Yeah, probably Philadelphia, walks out, with a win against Atlanta. Now that remains to be seen, how they stack up against Tampa. But what I will say about Philadelphia in that game is they weren't healthy. So hey, it's not it's not something you can hang your hat on as an excuse. Football is football at the end of the day, but that it does play into that outcome. But what I will say is, looking at the Lions defense, however, they are better at turning the ball over. or not turning the ball over, getting the turnovers. Philadelphia, to their credit, has worked on that so much to the point where if they went head to head, there's a big opportunity that Philadelphia could win the turnover battle. And Zach, we were talking about this, especially you, throughout the beginning of the season with the rush that the Philadelphia Eagles produce. That has come on tenfold, and I believe it's Hutchinson that they're missing on the Lions.
Yeah.
If they went head to head right now, who do you think? Just based on health again, going head to head in this one shot opportunity, I think that Philadelphia might surprise, and Goff might be very stressed out through that entire game. Also, Quinyon Mitchell probably playing on a wide receiver like St. Brown. I think that's a hell of a matchup. That excites me.
Incredible.
Well, the really curious thing that you have with St. Brown, right, is that he's a guy that they like to run on the outside, but then also run through the slot. And you're not really going to see Quinyon Mitchell work too much out of the slot. But guess who you will see? Cooper DeJean. So you're going to have that multifaceted attack where you're either getting one of these dynamic rookies or Darius Slay, who is in the midst of another solid season, like for all the crap that he puts Eagles fans through, and thus they give Darius Slay. Like for all that, he's having another good season. So you really look and like, where's Amon-Ra going to go effectively, right? So that's something that I think is really intriguing about that kind of particular matchup is that, when you have a kind of like a chess piece, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, the only thing they can't stop is that he's actually one of the best wide receivers throwing touchdowns, but that happens like once every 50 games. So hopefully you don't run into that problem. If you give up an Amon-Ra passing touchdown, then we got other problems that you have to talk about. But offensively, matching up against this team, the way that this team can stop the run, I would say maybe David Montgomery gives me a little bit of pause just because he's just such an impressive power runner. But Derrick Henry, I think, would be the perfect test.
Yes.
And I don't mean to insult Derrick Henry. It's only because they'd be playing him first potentially. Derrick Henry will be the perfect test for that kind of power run that David Montgomery is. And you can argue Kieran Williams will be a good test for that receiving electric back against Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, they're not going to be facing those guys at the same time. That's the key difference between these next two matchups for the Eagles and a potential matchup against Detroit. But what I will say is at least you're getting experience alongside those types of players, right? Because that's the big concern is that, well, this defense is kicking ass against the Cowboys, against a rookie quarterback for the Commanders, against the Jaguars, the Browns, teams like that, Giants, Cincinnati Bengals, who talented all they are, they're still 7-4 or not 7-4, 4-7 are they?
Yep.
Yeah,
well, I mean, Joe Burrow's elite regardless of what's going on over there.
I agree, and that's the point that you have to give some credit, but at the same time, like it's not like T. Higgins has been healthy all year. He missed the game against Philadelphia. They obviously losing Joe Mixon was unbelievably huge for the Cincinnati Bengals. Just watching the way that he's exploding in Houston. I mean, anyone who has him on his fantasy team, just what a great move. But the way that he's
especially when they go against the Cowboys.
Clearly affected them. So you look at guys like Chase Brown. You look at guys like Zach Moss, who now obviously out for the year, but they did fine. But it's still not the same thing from a playmaking perspective, right? So that team is clearly worse than they've been in the past. So you still have to kind of consider it that way. Now, what I think you can argue is that the way that the Eagles defense schemed against Joe Burrow shows promising signs of life against talented quarterbacks. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the Eagles play Dak Prescott, and I know for all of his flaws, he is still, I would call, in the top half of quarterbacks in the NFL, Dak Prescott. Especially when he's throwing to a guy like CeeDee Lamb. So that's unfortunate, really, that we didn't get a chance to see that. But Jaden Daniels, who was kind of lighting up the league against sub-500 teams, they locked it down. They held Terry McLaurin, and by they, I'm talking about Quinyon Mitchell.
Talking about him.
They locked Terry McLaurin down.
Right.
Zero targets against Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, Guantanamo Bay, man.
Was it
what
zero
else can you
or
say?
Was it zero, or did he finally get one like a garbage
targets
time?
against
nothing.
Mitchell?
Wow, really? Whoa.
Yes,
Okay,
I think he had
time.
one or two targets on the game, but zero against Quinyon Mitchell specific.
Okay, got you. All right.
I mean, that's the definition of lockdown.
It's a very interesting matchup between Lions and Eagles if it comes down to that, right? Like the Lions, they're a very well-rounded team. They are exactly what we expected Philly to be because we have a Devontae Smith, because we have an AJ Brown and a Dallas Goedert. I don't know. Like this they remind me of the Niners when the Niners were just on, right? But then the Niners came to Philly and it was a whole different story. Obviously, Purdy got knocked out of the game.
Right.
They remind me of Minnesota when Case Keenum was cooking over there, and Minnesota was that team that everybody was fearing. They came to Philly, they got whopped. It just, I don't like my idea with Eagles playoffs is if a team has to come to Philly, you're not coming out of here alive. You're not winning. It's just factual at this point. But if we had to visit the Lions, it becomes a lot more interesting. While we are a better road team as of late, it's still, there's not much favor on the road. And that's why I feel like you have to find a way. You can only control what you can control, right? Lions don't lose, they don't lose. If the Lions do lose, though, and you guys are tied at two losses apiece, you have to control what you can control, and that's win out.
And that's one of the biggest things I think about, the Eagles being from Philadelphia is that these Philadelphia fans travel so well to the point where they're going to make their presence known. So every away game isn't the most away, it's not as much of an away game like, some other teams, right? You do have your section, you will hear them. We hear them on TV pretty much every time. But what I will say, I want to go back to Zach's point about the Derrick Henrys and Montgomerys. I think the one running back that Philadelphia faced this season that kind of reminds me of anything like them is Josh Jacobs in week 1. They held him to under 100 yards rushing, but they did not hold the Packers in all to under 100 yards rushing because I think Wilson, the backup is Wilson, right?
He was eating,
Yeah, he got like 40-something yards, so technically they break 100. But nonetheless, like that's at a time where you're not expecting too much from our defense either. They're learning things from the ground up, so to hold Josh Jacobs to roughly 80-something yards in that game, I think that's a win, for the time. And when you look back now, seeing what the team is, I think they can hang in there against a guy like a Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry, I know, is a little bit of a different animal. He's
especially working alongside Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, he's a prototype, and especially with that offense. But at the same time, this defense, I think, is built to hang with the best offenses in the league. So it'll be very interesting to see what this personnel can do down the stretch here and into the postseason. And I'll go back to one of my points from a couple weeks ago. It's amazing what you can see these coordinators kind of flush out their personnel in tenfold Fangio in the defense.
Absolutely. And if I can circle back to a point Eric made earlier, actually, just along that turnover conversation, right? Because that's potentially going to be key for the rest of the season. Now that Philadelphia is facing tougher competition again, that's going to be something to watch. Has this improvement, is it legitimate or is it fugazi because of who they've played, right? But let's talk about where they've been and where that growth is, right? So on the season, Philadelphia is averaging 1.3 turnovers, or I should say takeaways per game. That puts them just outside the top 10, right at 12, right, tied with the LA Chargers. Over the last 3 games, the Philadelphia Eagles lead the league in takeaways per game, averaging 3 a game. Now, again, like you go back and you look at, well, who did Philadelphia play? They played Washington. They played Dallas. They had that 5 turnover, that 5 takeaway game against Dallas. That obviously helps there. And they played Jacksonville, right? So does that factor into it? Of course it does. But you know what else it does? It builds confidence, right? So this is a team that is now getting accustomed to taking the ball away. This is a team that you hear how they talk about specifically Nick Sirianni's influence and motivation tactics to get this team to take the ball away. This is a team that wants it. This is a team that wants to take, except for arguably Keon Mitchell, who continues to not catch the interception. But
he needs
everyone else
so bad.
He just wants no targets. He doesn't, he's fine with cardio. He doesn't want to, do any. He'll pass
He's just
block.
standing out there right
He's an
now.
Iron Man.
He'll deflect, but he's not trying to catch anything. But no, you watch guys like Reed Blankenship, rolling on the grass every time he catches a ball. Like, these are guys who want it. Like, these are guys on this defense who are really hungry. I think once Kenyon gets that first pick, he's gonna be like 1,000 times hungrier to get that second, to get that third, to get that fourth, right? So this is a team that I think has the right motivation, the right perspective when it comes to taking the ball away. They, to quote Chris Matthews, they understand it now, right? So they're here. They understand what taking the ball away does, and that's what they're trying to do night in and night out. So I think that's one more story to watch, just as this season progresses, as the Eagles face tougher competition. Can they continue to take the ball over? Maybe not at the rate that they're doing it now, but at a significantly higher rate than they were before these 3 years.
And I think a good thing about this defense is that this season, of all seasons, and we've stressed about this for so many years, right? They get off the field when it comes down to it. Like, third and long have not been a significant weakness of theirs. They've been able to hold teams out of the red zone. They've been able to stop drives, and it's something we have rarely seen out of them. One quick thing is, I do want to ask you guys, when it comes down to both teams, if it comes down to the NFC Championship game, Lions, Eagles, right? I think the bigger question above all else, and I'm not trying to pick a fight, is which coach has the advantage.
You motherfucker.
Both coaches, they're both CEO coaches. They're both culture guys. They're both motivators. Dan Campbell's just like, is Bane, and Nick Sirianni.
I think this is a
Bruce
fair
Wayne.
conversation for Nick Sirianni, right? So, like, if I can get at this one first, like, I don't think the difference is egregious. I don't think that there's, the Grand Canyon apart between these two guys. I think that I probably would give Dan Campbell the edge, but I don't think that it's a ridiculous conversation to have, whether you're talking about who should be coach of the year or if you're talking about who's just the flat out better coach, which is not necessarily.
You would give Campbell the edge, even though Sirianni's been there?
Same.
I think I would give Campbell the edge just because of the
composure, or
no. It's not really a word that I consider with him. We saw Nick get to the Super Bowl, and Nick actually do well in the Super Bowl, yes. But there's never been that. I mean, I guess you could bring that to composure. There's never been that level of lows with Dan Campbell, right? Even when he was talking about biting kneecaps, the players loved it. They were all about it. So, like, they're both quirky guys in their own right, and I'm also perfectly comfortable giving the edge to Sirianni. Like, I think I would give it to Campbell, but that's again simply just because of that consistency. Which that's been king. Consistency goes a long way in the NFL, and it's by the narrowest of margins. I'd give it to Dan, but I also think the Eagles are a more talented roster, and I think that may be what decides it in the end.
I think the reason why, and I do agree with giving the edge to Dan Campbell. However, it's very marginal. Like, this is 51-49, and it could be 50-50. But I will say that, as far as Dan Campbell is concerned, I watch Eagles football every time they're on the television, and one things that I do get very annoyed about with Sirianni is sometimes his decisions to go for it, and it kind of, I couldn't be mad about it this time around with Washington because, Elliott was missing those kicks, but did not take the points, not go for the points were there. And sometimes that would mean, in a close game, that could be the deciding factor. In a sense of composure that way in decision making, I would probably be more up to side with Campbell. That's because I'm a lot more critical of Sirianni because that's who I watch on a weekly basis. I'm sure there's some Detroit fans out there that are going, clearly you don't watch Dan Campbell. Well, you'd be right. I really don't watch the Lions each week. But what I will say is, aside from the coaches, I'm a little bit afraid that if it came down to a close game, like all these metrics we've been pointing out pretty similar so far, if it came down to the kickers, I don't know. I have no idea, because it's not that I don't think that Elliott's good, but I think that he has been out of a rhythm so much this year that he's trying to find that rhythm to get back in. And that's dangerous for when you're asking for somebody to come up in clutch time. Like that's just kind of how I see it. These are all things that can go like one way or another, clearly, in a very minimal, but enough of a result driven way, where hey, there's a missed kick, or hey, if you don't convert this fourth down, what does it do then? What's the butterfly effect? And in those ways, especially with a little bit of recency bias sprinkled in all that, I think at this moment I would be giving that to Dan Campbell. However, in the same breath, I will say that Nick Sirianni, I think, has matured from the beginning of the season to now. He's kind of trusted his coordinators and personnel a little bit more than from what we've seen in the past. And I think that, good on him for doing that, because I think he does have coordinators now that he can trust versus ones that we've seen in the past. And that kind of dates back to Gannon too. I get Gannon's, doing well as a head coach. And I get that, Gannon was a defensive coordinator when we went to the Super Bowl. But at the same time, I'm probably trusting Fangio over Gannon, as a defensive coordinator. So you're putting the trust where it should be. I think he's Sirianni.
When you said that, like when you said probably, was there like a little bit of like sarcasm, or is it just probably? Like
probably for what?
I immensely trust Vic Fangio over.
Oh no, that's sarcasm. Okay,
just making sure.
Were you? I was down. I'm like, which probably?
I'm just making sure I'm picking up on what you're putting down.
Yeah, no, like I'm probably like, yes, I am. Like, duh, yes. I'm putting that into Fangio over a Gannon, and I take Gannon's personnel and we put Fangio there. I'm going, yo, Fangio. Like, why? Like, dude, Gannon, stay in Arizona. Like he kind of did. But at the end of the day here, I will say, as of this week, I do think that Campbell probably does have the edge, but it's not by much. Like, we're talking about two teams right now, and in comparison, where I look at them as equals.
Yeah.
If you told me it was a field goal game at the last couple of seconds left in the fourth quarter or in overtime, I agree. I believe it.
I don't know. I mean, Campbell is the feel good story, right? He's a feel good story of the NFL. Like, this is the most football guy of all head coaches. Like, this is the guy that that you see on TV sitcoms as the football coach. Like, that's who he is, right? Like, but it just feels like I would trust Nick in this kind of situation, just because I don't like Nick he overthinks everything, oversays everything, overanalyzes everything. Like, that's just who he is. He's an over kind of guy, right? But we've seen him in the playoffs almost outcoach Andy Reid, right? We've seen him in the playoffs. Granted, I don't give a damn that Purdy was knocked out as part of the game, but we did see him outcoach Kyle Shanahan. We've seen special things out of Nick. And I just feel like that experience going against a Reid in the Super Bowl, going against a Kyle Shanahan in the NFC Championship game. I mean, he hasn't beaten Todd Bowles yet, but Todd Bowles is in a lane of his own. I'd give the edge to Nick, just because there's just, as much as I've doubted him in the beginning of the season, there's something about Nick that has not been unleashed yet. And I feel like if this specific team in this specific season got to the NFC Championship game, I feel like that next level of Nick would be unlocked, because it's for all the marbles. Like, this is what your coaching career is riding on, especially if you have a career year out of Saquon. You have a career historical year out of defense. Like, it just feels like Nick does have a tendency of showing up when it matters most. Like, this is a winning streak. Nobody's heard a peep at him. Like, nobody has said anything negative about Nick, and nobody's even heard anything negative out of Nick's mouth. And with the media, he's very, to the point with everything. And you took the bait, didn't you?
Oh no, I'm just saying, like,
I see you in the chat arguing over there. Did you take the bait?
No, I'm not talking about that.
I peeped that immediately too.
I was just gonna say, radio's still radio. Like,
I don't know why pays attention to that radio station.
Nick has still come up in the midst of this 6-game win streak, which is crazy to say, mind you.
Go ahead, get it out.
That's business. No, No. All I'm just saying is like literally like the 6-game win streak. I'm trying to remember what what the specific call was today, but the conversation was just around the idea. This was WIP, of course, about Nick Sirianni. Just like how much is he contributing? I think the question was like, is he great, good, average, or bad? And it's like the obviously like what they're looking for is how many people say bad, right?
Mhm.
That's where the conversation's going. Like, to what degree can you credit Nick Sirianni for what has happened this year? If you replaced him with any other head coach, what's the result in Philadelphia? And it's like, man, they're on a 6-game win streak. Like, save that for a loss. Honestly, like that there's going to be time to have that conversation. Just not now. So that's for me. Like, that's the only thing. Is what kind of hit my ear was like, I feel like a lot less noise questioning Nick Sirianni at the moment. But the
I feel like
fact
we
that
have
it's
more noise
not
questioning
0,
Jalen Hurts right now.
I agree. But the fact that it's not 0 during a 6-game win streak is kind of like let's find a new angle. Let's find a new slant. Something the Eagles need to run a little bit more too.
I see Isaac in the chat here, but what if we win one playoff game or two? Nick is here to stay. I'll do you one better about that. Let's just say it's Eagles Buccaneers early in the playoffs.
I'll be so pissed off.
If the Eagles defeat the Buccaneers, I don't care what happens the rest of the playoffs. Nick's here to stay. That's a job, kind of, securing game right there. If you win that game, because you've gotten over the hump against a potential opponent. Unfortunately, now you have a new hump that you got to get over. But I think it buys you a new lease to get over that hump.
Are they in the playoffs?
I'll do you one better. If the Eagles make the playoffs and don't suffer an embarrassing loss again, and maybe not even then, I think Nick Sirianni's back again next year either way.
I think he's back regardless.
I don't think this organization is trying to get rid of him, if I'm being honest with you.
I think
their
guy.
The players they have to deal with some lashback from the public, but if that's their biggest problem, I think they'll take that on the chin and call it a win.
I think the biggest testimony of that was when Saquon was asked if there was a level of panic after the first couple of games before the bye week. He said no, there was no panic. I think the panic was you guys. He said that to the media. It was like right there shows Nick has his team on point, whether we see him as goofy or not, right? Like, he has this team on point behind closed doors, and that's the only thing that matters.
He's kind of checked that a little bit at the door too. Like, he found the time and place for the being loud, and I think that's the perfect. Because at the end of the day, one thing that's always going to be true about football is there's so much emotion wrapped up into it. Mm-hmm. And as a coach, you're still going to be that, just like the players too. And I think that's a mark of a good leader. Because if you're just walking around stoic, Ben Simmons stoic, then you're not leading anything. You're not even leading your left foot in front of your right foot at that point. Like, what are you doing, Benzo? But, like, at the end of the day here, Nick Sirianni, I thought that, his maturity from last year to this year, I think, speaks so many volumes. And to have this kind of personnel on this team kind of backing you, I think that having these coordinators, it's more of a stamp of approval. Yeah, going through it and really analyzing and listening to and kind of taking away, like, the narratives that I think a lot of media tries to drive. Like, for example, did Hurts have an ankle thing? Like, no, he never had an ankle thing. Sorry. Like, I know that would have been a juicy
headline. That was the wildest thing.
Yeah, I know that would have been a juicy headline, like clickety click, I get it, but like, no. I wish he did what Lamar Jackson did when he was like, how's your knee? And Lamar was like, and just like did a little with his knees real quick, and like he ran on place. He was like, they're fine. Like,
Jalen does it in a very FU kind of way. When they asked him about his ankle afterwards, he's like, "Did it look like I have an issue with my ankle?"
Yeah, I love that answer.
Like, Jalen's a little bit of an asshole, but you got to respect it because he just doesn't want to deal with BS. He wants to talk football, but in a respectful manner.
When I listened to that, I was like, yeah, that's a respectable answer, because I think, like, I'm not a part of Philadelphia Eagles media. To me, when that slipped, I thought it was just a Freudian slip. Like, as far as like, it could have been someone else's ankle. And he just said, was it resting? Yeah, it was resting. And then they try to run with it because obviously we live in a world of
53-man roster at that. Like,
like we live, yeah, like media writers, whatever. We live in a world of clicks, So like we're going to try to get ours. But geez, for just, I know what's more important than the hot take having the right take. So have the right take. Just run with that. He wasn't hurt. It's not as unfortunately for you, writers, it's not news. But what we can say is, fortunately, Jalen Hurts is ready to go, against the Commanders, against the Rams, against, down the line.
When I was talking to the great Ray Didinger, name drop, he said the very same thing. Too many people are worried about being first these days in reporting. Not enough people are worried about being right. He actually told me that back in his day, you used to need 3 sources in order to actually drop something in a piece. And you can come back, the next day and have the article all done and give it to your editor and say, here you go. And they say, how many sources did you have? Well, I only had 2. So go out and get me a 3rd, and then we'll run. That was the level of importance they placed on properly sourcing information.
Well, now we live in a WWE era. It's just wrestling takes.
Honestly, it's every man for himself. It's who has who on alerts and then tries to claim it as their own reporting. So much of media nowadays, and once you kind of get that peek behind the curtain, it's shocking how much it truly is the case. You have so many people who are just copying off of other people and then claiming it as their own work when it comes to takes, and it's dangerous because when that take comes out bad, I mean, who's responsible? Everyone who claimed that take is their own, So it's really a way that you can do a lot of damage to your career long term, and do damage to the fan base, obviously, by spreading misinformation, and do a disservice to the team and to the athletes, the coaching staff, and everyone else involved.
Completely agree with that.
And a disservice to fellow journalists, might I say, as well. That's the other big thing, is by going out and just running with the story without solidifying it. That really sets a bad precedent, and that leaves a bad taste in the mouths of athletes, the consumer, other professional sports teams. That really makes you look bad. When someone else botches this up and fucks up a source, that makes all of us look bad. So that's why, amongst journalists who are truly invested in properly reporting on teams, this is a really hot button issue, because when the people who don't care fuck up, that's when we, even though we do care, look bad, and that causes issues.
And we got to pay for further repercussions of it from so many different angles, which sucks. But I feel like we covered the groundwork, right? We covered the hypotheticals, the idea of if Philly can actually hold this out. Just to wrap up the podcast, so we'll do 2 things. We can't do predictions because that's on Saturday. So we're gonna give Zach his corner.
Fantasy football hour? Are we doing the fantasy football hour?
No, we're definitely not doing that. Hell no. I'm not staying on for another hour.
Okay. I got no plans tonight. The wife's side of the house. There's no Sixers on. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my evening. So
I'm gonna give you your Sixers spotlight for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I can do that.
But before we get to that, do you think Philly ends up being the 1 seed, or will they go into the playoffs as the number 2 seed?
Okay, I'll put it this way. I would not be mad at all. I understand, you get the number 1 seed, you get the bye week, and that's huge as far as health. With the way that teams in Philadelphia across the board are kind of, competing with having that rest period, let's please knock the rust off, give them get them in there early, and let's see what of it. Let's have them compete. I would be fine if they got the number 2 seed and they just, rolled in there and they took on whoever. But if they do get the number 1 seed, I think it's almost inevitable that it's going to be Lions and Eagles to kind of figure out who's representing the NFC in the Super Bowl there.
I'm going to be honest, seeing the upcoming schedules for Detroit and for Minnesota, who I think you can't completely count out. I don't think they'll get the top seed, because I think at best they'll tie with Detroit. But they could overcome Philadelphia for that number 2 seed and push the Eagles to 3. But I feel pretty confident about the Eagles' chances, considering who they have left. I feel comfortable. If I had to guess and speculate at their record from here on out, the Eagles, that is, I feel pretty comfortable saying that this team is going to go 6-1. And for a team like Detroit, when you're playing the 49ers, you have a division game against the Packers, who are uneven but clearly talented. They play the Buffalo Bills, which I think is going to be pretty difficult for them, even though it's at home. And, yes, the Eagles also have, a lot of division games, but the 2 division games against the Bears and the one against the Vikings that the Lions have, I just think that's going to generally be more difficult than the divisional games that the Eagles have, right? Facing the Giants one more time, who are on their 3rd string quarterback, facing the Cowboys, who likely by then will also be on their 3rd string quarterback. And then again, a rookie Jaden Daniels, who you handled pretty comfortably in your first matchup. I feel pretty confident in this Eagles team moving forward. So I'd say that they have a half decent chance at getting that 1 seed, probably around 40% or so.
A couple things away from the Eagles and Lions. I guess just a little quick mini this or that real quick. So is it the Giants that are going to be putting in Drew Lock, or are they putting in Tommy Cutlets?
It's Tommy Cutlets, and Drew Lock is going to back him up, and then Daniel Jones is backing him up.
So that's why the New York Giants suck. Here's the real, and I love this because I kind of I am going to borrow this take. I think it was from Mark Schlereth, but he said this earlier, and it's 100% true. You got Drew Lock, who is more than capable, probably the better quarterback there too.
He's not a bad QB, to be honest.
Right, and to back up Daniel Jones, and he signed with the Giants to go over there because Daniel Jones is already suspect. Can't believe you paid him the money, but that's New York Giants for you. And what do? They're going to put in a guy who is a crowd favorite because he did a couple, Ragu commercials for what it's worth. And so, I don't get it, man. It's a clown show. It's the clown show that we thought it was. Regardless of Saquon Barkley becoming an Eagle at their expense, regardless of them paying Daniel Jones, which only supports it being a clown show. But this is a clown show maneuver as well. They're 3 for 3 in becoming a clown show in 2024. Holy hell, do they suck?
Yeah, that's a pretty bad. Yeah, they're bad. They're so high for the NFL. But to go back to the Eagles thing, I think I'm with Eric. I don't mind if they go as a 2 seed. I was looking it up while you guys were talking about because I mentioned before that the Eagles are a pretty good road team over the last several seasons. In 2021, 6-3 on the road. 2022, 7-1. Last year, 5-4. This year, 4-1. The Chiefs under Andy Reid are the only other team with a winning road record in all 4 of those seasons. So if the Eagles have to go to Detroit, if the Eagles have to go to Minnesota, the case may be, I'm still pretty confident that they'll pull it out and win. I would love it if the NFC has to go through Philly. It's always a good feeling that way.
It is a good feeling that way. I mean, to a certain extent, though, they have a number 2 seed. Wouldn't it still be?
We'll get 2 games.
Okay,
right?
So it wouldn't be the NFC Championship at home then.
No, it wouldn't be the NFC.
Well, potentially could be. Okay.
If the Lions lose, then that's when it'll be given to us for Philly.
The other thing I wanted to bring up on this or that real quick is, Brock Purdy. Are the 49ers really about to pay him like $60 million?
I don't think he's not worth it. I think he's
okay.
Compared to Daniel Jones, he's a better quarterback.
I mean, right. Yeah. Well, so is Will Grier.
But, yeah.
It's a good story. The 49ers are trying to make Brock well, not the 49ers. The 49ers fans are trying to make Brock Purdy be what he isn't yet. Could he be that? Potentially, right? He has good moments. He's not a bad quarterback. He makes good decisions, but it's just some guys don't have that, that it factor. Like when you think about Jalen Hurts, he's a winner. Lamar Jackson, he's a winner. Pat Mahomes, he's a winner. He's one of the greatest of all time, possibly. Josh Allen, he's a freaking steamroller. He just runs people over. But Purdy, I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about it, Zach?
I think he's actually started to win me over a little bit this year, if I'm being honest. Not enough to treat him as if he's like top 5 quarterback in the league, but he showed more toughness than he's shown in years previous. More of a willingness to run, which I didn't really see as part of his game until this year. Now that he's starting to get some weapons back, we're starting to see, like, listen, all the criticisms that Eagles fans have had for Brock Purdy, look at what Jalen Hurts is doing with this team. And I like Jalen. I think Jalen's a very good quarterback in this league. But every quarterback needs playmakers. Like, the only exception is Patrick Mahomes, and he has very talented playmakers on the field. They're just wearing black and white instead of red. So, like, there's times where any quarterback, there's times where every quarterback needs playmakers on the field, right? So, I think that you can't really hold that completely against Brock. Like, you could say a little bit, but I think he's really stepped up his game this season, and he improved me, or he impressed me, I should say, a good bit this year.
Would you? So I guess kind of going to. I'm not going to. I think there's a little bit of a difference between the Hurts and Purdy comment, where, like, I don't see Hurts as a system quarterback. I see that the offense he plays in is more of a rush first before passing. But as far as Purdy, do you think that he's a product of the system in San Francisco versus, like, himself being a quarterback of the future?
So Jalen Hurts is such an intriguing quarterback because he's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde of his own self, right? When you watch this guy play and he has that confidence in his game, I think he's an elite quarterback. I think that he's one of the top quarterbacks in the entire league. I would put him behind Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Probably that's it, right? So that's his peak, right? But it's not his peak all the time, unfortunately, that we see. Like, there's valleys in there as well. There's times where he's not, secure. I got a new mic on. Bear with me. Appreciate it. There's times where he's not as secure in his own game and the play calling and what have you. And you watch him almost push, and press too much. And that's when you see some of those forced throws that we saw earlier this year. That's where you see him think about everything else in the game except for ball security. And we see the fumbles come back again, right? So these issues can present themselves, and the back and forth is more constant. That state of fluctuation is more fluid than it is in most quarterbacks, I think, than in Jalen Hurts. With Brock Purdy, I think it's a bit more consistent. You're just not seeing the same heights. And that's the biggest problem that I think in Brock, is that he is a good, at best, very good quarterback. Whereas Jalen Hurts is a good, at very best, elite quarterback. And I think that's what really kind of separates those two.
Okay.
All right. I promised you 5 minutes. You could do your thing.
Is Marshawn Lynch even here? Are we going to talk about it or not? Like, it's there's no point in talking about it if he's not here. So
I think he's still here. He's probably floating around somewhere. I would just talk about it. He could listen to it later. The floor is yours.
Fair.
Yeah. Well, what I'll do instead, I'll just do a little commercial here, because I'm actually going to be talking about this more tonight on WIP with Jody Mack. The Philadelphia 76ers and their locker room team meeting that they had after giving up a 19-point lead, and somehow not only did they give up a 19-point lead, but they then got blown out on top of it, right? So we're talking about, it's like a 35-point swing right around there, I believe it was. So basically, they had a team meeting after the game. All I'm going to say is, if you want to hear more about that, tune in to Jody Mack show tonight at midnight, or if that's a little late, I understand it. Check out the Odyssey app tomorrow to hear more about that, because a lot going on with the basketball team, despite the fact that they are not very freaking good. So if we want to talk happy things, we talk birds. If we want to talk, helplines and prevention methods, then we talk Sixers.
I could be on the helpline. I'll just direct you to the ice. So that's
I was gonna say you might be expediting the process for people. I don't know if you're necessarily gonna walk them off.
Hey, no, that's Tim. Hey, hello, yeah, blow it up. Yeah, blow. Fire everybody, blow it up.
I think if the two of you were put in charge of a project such as that, I'm trying to keep my words, man, but like it would be an I Love Lucy situation, right? At a certain point, you two would just start eating phones because you're getting too many calls and you're not, getting them in time.
That's
Well,
perfect. We're in sync with Philadelphia. Yeah, I agree. Blow it up. All right, cool. Whatever you want to hear, man.
With all that being said, we appreciate all you guys for tuning in this week. Be sure to tune in on Saturday where we'll preview the Eagles-Rams game, which is going to be on Sunday night, I believe, right? It's 8:15 Sunday night, something like that.
Sunday night, yes.
Yeah, I mean, until then, we're Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Eric Reese, Zach Chavalella, and we'll see you guys on Saturday.
I had that point like dead on, but go Birds!
Yes, sir.
Flip